Welcome. In the picture, we are seeing along Gandhiji, some people are walking. They are going to Dandi to break the salt. Welcome to all of you in my channel. Today, I am going to represent a topic named Civil Disobedience Movement. It was a movement that had taken by the nationalist leaders to refusal to obey the demands or commands of the British government or occupying power without restoring to violence or active measures of opposition. Its usual purpose is to force concession from the government or occupying power. Civil disobedience has been a major tactic and philosophy of nationalist movement in Africa and India, in the American civil rights movement, and of labor, anti-war, and other social movements in many countries. Civil disobedience is a symbolic or ritualistic violation of the law rather than a rejection of the system as a whole. The movement finding legitimate avenues of change blocked or non-existent feels obligated by a higher extralegal principle to break some specific laws. It is because acts associated with civil disobedience are considered crimes, however, and known by actor and public alike to be punishable, that such act sever as a protest. By submitting to punishment, the civil disobedience hope to set a moral example that will provoke the majority of the government into effecting meaningful political, social, or economic change. Under the imperative of setting a moral example, leaders of civil disobedience insist that the legal action be non-violent. It is popularly known as Salt March and also known as the Salt Satyagraha, Dandi March, and the Dandi Satyagraha was an act of non-violent civil disobedience in colonial India led by Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. The 24-day march lasted from 12 March 1930 to 6 April 1930 as a direct action campaign of taxation resistance and non-violent protest against the British salt monopoly. Another reason for this march was that the civil disobedience movement needed a strong inauguration that would inspire more people to follow Gandhiji's example. Mahatma Gandhi started this march with 79 of his trusted volunteers walking 10 miles a day for 24 days. The march spanned over 240 miles from Sabarmati Ashram to Dandi, which was called Navshari at that time, now in the state of Gujarat. Growing numbers of Indians joined them along the way. When Gandhiji broke the salt laws at 6:30 a.m. on 6th April 1930, it sparked large-scale act of civil disobedience against the British Raj salt laws by millions of Indians. You can see an image that Gandhiji picked up grains of salt at the end of his own march. Behind him, in his second son, Manilal Gandhi and Mithuben Petit. It was dated 12 March 1930. After making the salt by evaporation at Dundee, Gandhi continued southward along the coast, making salt and addressing meeting on the way. The Congress party planned to stage the Satyagraha at Darashana Salt Works, 25 miles south of Dundee. However, Gandhiji was arrested on the midnight of 4th May 1930, just days before the planned action with this. The Satyagraha against the salt tax continued for almost a year, ending with Gandhiji's release from jail and negotiations with Viceroy Lord Irwin at the second round table conference. Although over 60,000 Indians were jailed as a result of the salt Satyagraha, the British did not make immediate major concessions. You can see Gandhiji and his companions went to the Dundee to break the law, and along with him 60,000 Indians were jailed as a result of the Satyagraha. But the British government did not make any immediate major concessions. The Salt Satyagraha campaign was based upon Gandhiji's principles of non-violent protest called Satyagraha, which he loosely translated as truth force. Literally, it is formed from the Sanskrit word Satya, means truth, and Agraha, means insistence. In early 1930, the Indian National Congress chose Satyagraha as their main tactic for winning Indian sovereignty and self-rule from British rule, and appointed Gandhi to organize the campaign. Gandhiji chose the 1882 British Salt Act as the first target of Satyagraha. The Salt marched to Dundee and beating by British police of hundreds of non-violent protesters at Darashana, which received worldwide news coverage, demonstrated the effective use of civil disobedience as a technique for fighting social and political injustice. The Satyagraha teachings of Gandhiji and the march to Dundee had a significant influence on African activist Martin Luther King, James Bevel, and others during the civil rights movement for African American and other minority groups in 1960s. The march was the most significant organized challenge to British authorities since the non-cooperation movement of 1920 to 22, and directly followed the Purna Swaraj Declaration of Sovereignty and Self-Rule by the Indian National Congress on 26 January 1930. It gained worldwide attention, which gave impetus to the Indian independence movement and started the nationwide civil disobedience movement. Actually, civil disobedience movement was a kind of movement by which Gandhiji wanted to show that through the Satyagraha anyone can win if he or she is in the way of truth. Civil disobedience is a kind of movement where all the classes of the society join these. The philosophical roots of the civil disobedience lie deep in Western thought. Cicero, Thomas Aquinas, John Locke, Thomas Jefferson, Henry David all sought to justify conduct by virtue of its harmony with some superhuman moral law. The modern concept of civil disobedience movement was most clearly formulated by Mahatma Gandhi. Drawing from Eastern and Western thought, Gandhiji developed the philosophy of Satyagraha, which emphasizes non-violent resistance to evil. First in the Transversal of South Africa in 1606 and later in India, via such actions as the Salt Satyagraha in 1930, Gandhiji sought to obtain equal rights and freedom through Satyagraha campaign. Drawing part on Gandhiji's example, the American civil rights movement, which came to prominence during 1950s, sought to end racial segregation in the southern United States by adopting the tactics and philosophy of civil disobedience through such protest as the Greensboro, North Carolina sit in 1960 and the Freedom Rides 1961. So we can tell the principle of civil disobedience has achieved some standing in international law through the war crime trials at Nuremberg, Germany also. Gandhiji, in his civil disobedience movement, by making laws, he had broken the law, means assault law, and it had a great impact on Indian freedom struggle. So we can tell it is one of the finest movement started by Gandhiji, and it had immense importance in the history of India. Then